All right, everyone, it's 3:02, so let's get started. My name is Carrie Slade. I'm the Assistant Academic Director of Temple's Innovation and Entrepreneurship Institute, and I'm the person in charge of kind of coordinating these lifelong learning webinars that hopefully you've been joining. We had one a month or two ago on business model innovation, and today we have strategies for open innovation. A very warm welcome to any IRI members or PDMA members on the line today. We're really excited for that partnership and glad you could join us. Also, a special welcome to any students going into our Innovation Management and Entrepreneurship Master's program starting in fall 2020 or even in summer 2020. We accept students all 3 semesters. So special welcome if you're joining us to get a preview of what you're going to be studying in the courses. Without further ado, I will introduce Lisha Davis. We are so excited to have her here to talk to us about open innovation and how she used it at Vanguard and some strategies for using it at your organization. Lisha is the former founder and head of Vanguard's Innovation Studio, located in Center City, Philadelphia. In that role, she led strategy, operations, and the ongoing delivery of an innovation portfolio focused on future and growth-oriented ventures that could transform Vanguard's business or potentially disrupt the financial services industry. Today, Lisha is an investor with 37 angels focused on increasing representation of diverse founders and funders. She's also a venture partner at VU Venture Partners, an early growth stage fund based in San Francisco and New York. Finally, she serves as a mentor and advisor to startups across the consumer and fintech sectors. After she left Vanguard Innovation Studio, we asked her to become an adjunct professor here at Temple to teach in our Innovation Management and Entrepreneurship program. And we are so lucky that she has agreed, and she is an adjunct professor here at Temple at the Fox School, teaching open innovation and strategic partnerships. She currently lives in New York City and travels often in pursuit of new adventures. Lisha, thank you so much for joining us. I will turn it over to you so you can share your screen and get started.
Great. Thank you so much, Carrie. Really appreciate it. And for those of you who may just be joining, pardon me, I just turned off my video for a bit. I realized there's some construction and stuff happening behind me, so it might be a little distracting. If you have any questions, feel free to just post it on the chat. I did prepare some slides to take you through the course, a high-level overview of the course that I teach, which is Open Innovation Strategic Partnerships, but really would love for this to be an open dialogue. So as I cover some of this content material, please feel free to cut in with any questions. I may address them right then and there, or if it's coming up in a subsequent slide, hold off a little. Okay, if that sounds good, then Carrie, I will share my screen.
Yep.
Carrie, I'm having a little bit of difficulty doing that. I wonder if you might be good enough to help me pull up.
Yeah, so I can pull up your slides. If you, when you move over your video, does a bar appear at the bottom?
Yeah, when I go to share, it's not letting me select the different ones that I want to share.
Hold on, let me.
There's like a caution error message that comes up.
Huh. Okay, I can bring them up for you. Just give me 1 second to pull them up.
Sure. I appreciate it.
No problem.
And if you don't mind being my sous chef,
yeah,
I'll
no problem.
Step through them.
Let's see, full screen.
Sorry, everyone, please bear with.
No, I'm just trying to make it full screen. Okay, so let me go back here. I will share my screen and then we will get started. There we go.
Yeah, perfect. Perfect, okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. Really, really helpful. Thanks. So just to kind of kick things off, wanted to give a quick primer of the course that I teach. I just taught it in the spring and will again virtually this fall on open innovation and managing strategic alliances. And I think, you know, before we dive into all the exciting things about all things innovation, I think the true purpose of the class is really to help students gain an understanding of various innovation approaches and the right approach that matches with an organization's goals really is the key to understand. We do cover lots of frameworks and models. We will step through lots of real world cases, but my goal is to really help folks think deeply, assume multiple perspectives, and then come up with the right set of recommendations given the circumstances for each corporation. So what might work for a Vanguard, for example, may work very differently for a Blue Cross versus a Comcast, or if you're a startup. So I think the goal of the course is just to understand that while we will explore lots of tools and resources, the goal is to help you kind of identify and match what type of models might be most suitable for a particular organization. Okay, great. So let's move forward.
One second, I'm figuring out how to do that while in the there we go.
Yeah, great. And if it's helpful, I mean, we can even leave it on that screen just to scroll through quickly.
Okay, I'll do that next time.
Awesome. Thank you. And so, you know, when we think about the topic of innovation, which is all the buzz now, I oftentimes get the question of, so what's the difference between regular innovation and open innovation, so to speak? I don't know that there is such a stark difference, except, you know, of course, you can think about different forms of innovation spanning products to business models, incremental to disruptive. But I'd like to think about open innovation as almost a way to describe the how you would get at that, right? It is just a approach that an organization might take to leverage knowledge, inspiration, skills, and collaboration from a variety of sources, both internal and external. So open innovation can span the form of leveraging an organization's employees to contribute to the innovation agenda and as well as build and make innovative concepts a reality, all the way to outsourcing that and relying on the diverse audience set outside of a company's walls to help them get at those agendas. So we'll touch on during this webinar a combination of some of the most popular approaches. Awesome. So another way to look at how you might get to innovative outcomes, we oftentimes talk about the build, buy, or partner decision. So for the course that I teach, we primarily focus on build and partner. There are separate courses specifically on the buy option, which is focused primarily on M&A and corp dev functions. So when you think about addressing innovation through a build approach, this might involve a number of ways that corporations produce internal efforts to drive that innovation, such as you might have an innovation initiative. There are specific R&D departments that focus on that. There's a host of companies that employ hackathons, employee contests, essentially anything that they can do to tap into the collective to help them ideate. On the partner side, firms are increasingly recognizing that a lot of good insights, ideas, and skill sets may reside outside of the firm. And so to be able to tap into the broader external ecosystem, corporations are increasingly turning to incubators and accelerators, as well as venture studios, which is a newer form of innovation participant, corporate VC funds, fund of funds, direct funds to be able to invest and participate in lots of deal flow pertaining to interesting verticals of their choice, as well as leveraging open platforms, right, where lots of ecosystem participants can help them solve specific challenges. And so some of the examples that you see beneath those two columns of build and partner are probably some common companies that we've all heard of, but these are some of the methods that they've chosen to get at their innovation agenda. And then very simply put, the middle section of buy, which is your traditional mergers and acquisitions and corporate development functions, continue to accelerate growth for companies through some of the inorganic means, whether that's acquiring a firm to gain access to new markets and segments, talents and skills, or perhaps even a technology or product. And Amazon, Anheuser, LVMH are some examples of companies that pull that lever very often. Yep. So question was just, will I be sharing the slide deck? I can do that after the webinar. Yes. Thank you. Carrie, if you don't mind. Great. So let's first start on the internal forms of innovation approaches that companies take. So I'm sure many of these participants here on the webinar today have heard of some of these tools of the trade, so to speak. This is just a small collection of some of the methods, some of the tools that are oftentimes used with internal innovation teams to drive at outcomes. Things such as design thinking methodology that you see on the left, lean startup or agile, which is a lot of the ways that startups tend to build product and continuously test and learn. You think about the business model canvas to think through how you might be able to monetize and distribute your product. And then also the horizons of innovation is a nice framework to think through the various types of innovation that can take place within an organization. What's not labeled here, but correspond to the improve, expand, and disrupt horizons are your horizon 1, 2, and 3. So horizon 1, for those of you who may not be as familiar, describes some of your core forms of innovation. So this is your lowercase I, anything pertaining to helping an organization make their core business better, faster, cheaper, delight the consumer. Examples such as digital transformations, improving the client experience, taking out waste, making the operations more lean might be examples of Horizon 1 types of innovation. Horizon 2 in the expand category gets into adjacent products and segments. And then finally, the Horizon 3 or the disrupt category, which is probably what many of us associate with when we think about this big, lofty capital I innovation. This is innovations that could potentially create new categories or disrupt existing ones, and oftentimes is associated with leveraging nascent technologies or the creation of new business models, right? So a lot of the common products and services that we use today, from Amazon to rideshare, Uber, are examples of new business models using some familiar components, but compiled in a completely different way. So if you think about kind of these set of tools to help you uncover the right need, the right human problem to solve, and how to build a valid solution, test it, bring it to market, wrap it with the right business model to be able to monetize and hit product market fit, as well as think through how those things fit within the context of corporate innovation. Are you working on a Horizon 1, 2, or 3? These are oftentimes in conjunction the set of tools that a corporation may leverage to get at their internal innovation efforts. Let me pause there for a second and see if folks have any questions or comments. Okay, I'm gonna take silence as keep moving. Please feel free to cut in with questions if you have them. Great. Oh, so yeah, thought it might be nice, just given the location of Temple, it happens to be surrounded by lots of corporations, to give a quick example of who are the firms that are doing internal forms of innovation today. So at the bottom right, you'll see me and our former CEO, Bill McNabb, Vanguard. Of course, the Vanguard Innovation Studio got started in 2016 and is located in Center City, where we were focused on identifying white spaces within the financial services space and then building valid product, services, business models to bring them to bear. There was a dedicated team located there full-time at the Innovation Studio to get after these efforts. That is certainly an example of an internal venture studio. On the upper left, Independence Blue Cross Blue Shield, right here on Market Street. Michelle Hillstand and her team employ an internal consulting and coaching model whereby her team is disseminated throughout the various businesses to coach, teach, and train business folks to utilize some of the tools that we just saw to get at their innovation efforts. It could be a very fast and scalable way to spin up many different projects, because now you're kind of each one teach one. D10X is an example of a internal innovation effort from Citi, located in New York. So they're trying to aspire to get to 10x impact or returns. And it's an internal growth model that leverages internal employees to discover, test, build new solutions that subsequently could become scaled on behalf of Citi broadly. And then hackathons are just a very, very common way, and oftentimes what I see as the kind of first step that many corporations take when they are interested in starting formal innovation efforts. It takes the form of maybe a ideation challenge amongst employees, maybe a digital crowdsourcing platform, or maybe a 1 or 2 day hackathon where a certain set of problems are put out in front of the crowd and they're invited to participate in solving it with each other. So these are just some examples of internal innovation alive and well throughout the ecosystem. Great, so if there's no other questions, I think we can transition to talking more about the partner option, which is what might innovation look like when you're collaborating and partnering with the outside. So to kind of start that conversation, I did want to take it back to helping folks understand, so why would organizations do this? Right, so very simply put, diversity of thought is oftentimes thought of synonymously with innovation itself. And freshness of ideas, talent, tools, tech, access, traction, ability to accelerate your value are oftentimes some of the reasons that corporations cite when they think about partnering with the outside. Not all good ideas are found in one place. Not all one person or one group of people have all the right answers. And so whether you're doing open innovation challenges with the outside or working with any of the variety of ecosystem partners that are listed here, many corporations have found a lot of success accelerating their formal innovation efforts through collaboration with the outside. What you see as the graphic on the right is just a quick depiction of kind of what are some of the ecosystem participants that we'll be talking about. So of course, you've got startups and entrepreneurs on the right side. You think about academia and thought leaders with their applied research playing an active role. There are certainly large companies in my field that happen to be financial services institutions that you see on the bottom left. Government policymakers certainly play an active role, whether it's creating sandboxes to allow for open experimentation between corporates or between corporates and startups, or helping to pony up projects and fund some incubators and accelerators to work on things. And then finally, what's not depicted here is kind of the venture capital community, which you'll see on the left. There are many that focus specifically on particular verticals or stages of funding, but also increasingly so, I'm seeing a lot of collaboration between the venture capital community and corporate innovation firms. Great, so let's keep moving. Did want to give you guys just a quick primer on the prominent rise of startup accelerators and incubators. Some of these may be very familiar household names to some of you guys, but as you can see, just from the 10-year period from 2005 to 2015, my apologies, the data is a little bit dated, accelerators experienced a 50% year-over-year growth, with roughly 200 of them today representing 20 billion plus in capital. It's a little bit hard to read, but if you look to the left, highest growth verticals from 2012 to 2017 by industry span from, kind of advanced manufacturing and robotics, right? No surprise there. Astronomical growth rate. Blockchain, ag tech, agriculture tech, artificial intelligence, fintech, cybersecurity. The life sciences and healthcare is very popular, especially in Philly. Ed tech, gaming, clean tech, and ad tech. These represent some of the highest, fastest growing startup verticals, as well as concentration of efforts found in accelerators. And then what you see on the right is, I thought might be interesting to pull the top 10 accelerators in terms of the dollar amounts of their cumulative exits. Y Combinator out west in San Francisco, Techstars based out in Denver, AngelPad, so on and so forth. DreamIt, of course, based here in Philly, and so on and so forth. So each one of them kind of offers a set of similar value propositions for the startups that they undertake, largely coaching, support, mentoring, in-house resources to help you hone your craft and try to find product market fit and scale as quickly as possible, financing, connections, network, both corporate partners as well as an alumni network, just to name a few. But they all have some nuances to what they focus on as well, right? So Techstars, no surprise, most of their startups are tech-enabled. You know, Seed Camp, New York City Seed Start. It depends on, you know, how early in the stage they might want to focus as well. Great. So, so you might ask yourself, all right, so if I want to do innovation and I know I have internal and external levers to pull, we just covered internal. On the external side, if I'm interested in working with, say, startups or accelerators that represent startups, you know, how do I think through what each party may bring to the table? Because they're so different. And I think this is an interesting story where the complementary nature suggests strong mutual benefits in collaborating, but actually requires a lot of orchestration and best practices to do well. Very simply put, large corporations have successful business lines where there are repeatable, scalable processes that are designed to optimize execution, but not necessarily designed to support the exploration of new ideas, right? So you oftentimes hear of the natural tension between innovation and run state operations. But corporations bring expertise and knowledge, they have scale and scope, there's already existing successful distribution channels in place, there's brand recognition, and certainly they have capital, both for investing in startups as well as acquiring. On the startup side, look, these are growth-oriented businesses in search of repeatable, scalable business models and efficient execution against a sea of ever-increasing competition. So it's kind of like the opposite side of the coin of corporations. And startups bring passion, talent, creativity, lots of ideas, lean ways of working and thinking. They oftentimes leverage new technologies and new business models. Right, so as you can see, just in terms of this slide, there's lots of strengths that both sides bring to the table that, if unlocked properly, could really lead to mutual benefits and fuel the speed and growth of both sides. Okay, great. So let's take that a step further and think through how that engagement spectrum might play out. So there's obviously a variety of ways that these two parties can work together to produce and capture value. Some of what you see on the left are collaboration examples, and it usually starts from 1 to 5 in increasing degrees of involvement. So a corporation, if they're just starting out working with startups, could support a pilot project whereby you can identify a problem together, solve it together, build a product together, or the problem and solution may already be built through the startup, and you might want to customize a beta launch together. Right, so this might be a nice try before you buy method of determining if you're a right fit and if the solution, especially customized, might fit within the strategic roadmap of the corporate. Of course, the corporate can just sign on as a customer. They may think about being a distribution partner for the startup. Corporates can, now that we're getting into increasing degrees of involvement, really believe that there's a there, or maybe some of the earlier pilots and partnership has worked out well. Well, certainly they can think about investing more and more capital in the startups. And then finally, all the way through to an outright acquisition, right? So lots of examples of those in recent times where it could be a quick and impactful way to solve problems. So something is already built, maybe there's already traction, customers, product market fit is already found, and the corporate simply acquires the startup to be able to enter into the new market or have the new product or service on their lineup. So Much easier said than done. So if the left side represents various ways that these two parties can engage, the right side is just a nice shorthand reminder of some of the watchouts and why these collaborations work in theory, but are difficult to execute. So no surprise to you guys, clearly there's cultural differences and working styles between the two parties. Oftentimes there's different motives and goals. As an example, a startup's motive may be growth, or maybe traction, maybe number of user sign-ons, versus a corporate might be reaching scale as quickly as possible to compete or be evaluated against existing businesses, right? So making sure that those incentives are aligned and there's reasonable expectations that are mutually agreed upon is super important to success. We oftentimes talk about product corporate fit when thinking about the corporate startup engagement. And this is a twist on words from product market fit, of course, is making sure that the solution that you're bringing to bear, is it best for the corporation, or is it really best in class in solving a general industry problem? Right, so there's trade-offs on both sides of that table, and when a corporate brings on a startup and when a startup agrees to engage with a corporate, you have to think through how does that potentially impact your ultimate product roadmap. And then finally, just some quick highlights around thinking through kind of the overprotection and test tampering likelihood, and the risk mitigation, and maybe some of the misconception that look, startups are just completely risky and you don't know what's going to happen. Well, if you are trying to be sure that certain outcomes may manifest, one of the good ways to do that is to continuously do testing, but be very rigorous around data-driven decision-making. So when that tends to happen, startups maybe, and I say that very cautiously because everybody is human and it's very easy to become in love with your own baby. But startups understand that product market fit is found by continuously testing in the marketplace. And if something doesn't work, you have to change it, right? So I have found in my experience in working with some corporates that it's a little bit of a challenge for them to set these very clear positive signals and KPIs in advance of a test, and then agree if it doesn't prove out to an actual pivot. Sometimes one side or both could have a tendency to hover a little bit, and or insert their previously adopted ways of working into this new partnership. So just beware. Okay, let me also pause here for a second. It's a lot of material thus far. Any questions, comments? Carrie, either people are shy or they're just completely with me. I'm gonna keep going then.
Yeah, and just so you know, you can say your question out loud by raising your hand, or you can also chat it to either of us. So if you don't want to say it out loud, you can chat it to us.
Yeah, it's a good ad. Thank you. Great, and you can also chat it either publicly to everyone or just to myself. All right, let's keep going then. Okay, so I also wanted to touch on the corporate venture capital piece. So remember how previously when we talked about in the partner bucket, well, you can partner with accelerators and startups. You can also think about investing. Corporate venture capital is essentially a fund that a corporation sets up to be able to invest in promising startups. They can do so directly themselves, where the onus for identifying deal flow and doing diligence and crafting the right agreements happens on the corporate side, or they might indirectly work with a fund manager to be able to do that, or even invest in a fund of funds. Oftentimes, corporate venture capital, you'll hear the term, is this strategically driven or financially driven? Meaning financial returns is one side, right? That whether or not the startup has a product or service that may benefit you and your company, or may be leveraged by your company, or be incorporated into your company's roadmap, that is of secondary concern. You are investing primarily for financial returns. That is one side of the equation. The other side is strategically, which is, no, I very much care about investing in the types of things that could help me improve my business. Either it's going to be incorporated into my processes or my technology or my product lineup, or we think that given the competition, the market trends, and where the future strategy of my company is going to move, this particular startup is going to play an important role. So I would say most CVCs are at least a combination of both, if not primarily focused on strategically driven motives. You can also think about investing in the various stages. Are you early stage, so pre-seed, seed, maybe Series A, or are you much more comfortable investing in later stage companies that are already proven and have scaled to a certain extent? You can think about particular industry or subsector focuses or broad themes. For example, within financial services, AI, insurtech, let's see, blockchain, right? These are some examples of very high level categories or how you might think about some broad themes for your CVC. You can be domestic or global in scope. And of course, thinking through what type of involvement might you want to have with the portfolio companies during this? Are you just going to serve as an investor? Or would you like to drive value either by doing business with that startup or potentially advising, guiding them, introducing them to other corporates? Okay, so remember, CVC is another good way to access new innovation, supplement your R&D, and potentially build a biz dev pipeline.
It looks like we do have a question from Robert Williams. Lisa, do you want me to read that now?
Sure.
In addition to the risk of hovering, corporations tend to send small armies to the small firm and possibly overwhelm the attentions of the startup's management. Any advice on keeping the big guys from dominating the relationship?
Yeah, great question. Corporates hover? Never. Yes, this happens all the time, and not just corporates, but anytime when you have two parties working with each other. So I think this is a really important point and underscores something that is, I think, not talked about often enough, but super important to determining success. And that's essentially the rules of the engagement and the pipes and plumbing for how this partnership is going to work, right? It's very easy to become enamored with the startup founders or the corporation's brand or even the product that you're talking about. But how are you going to be working together and structuring a very specific partnership agreement is one of the must-dos in making sure that this works, down to who are the decision makers, what are the roles and responsibilities of both sides, what are the milestones and key stage gates you're going to be shooting for together. How do you make decisions? In the case of a tie, what happens, right? So I think a lot of those kind of not sexy, not fun discussions need to be ironed out very clearly and in writing up front. And then you might want to bake in a couple of kind of tests, small scale tests, before you start to embark on building something really major to see if that works. And then the last thing that I'll say is, look, stress testing a startup is also a part of due diligence that I would urge large corporates to look at as well. And what I mean by that is a startup, depending upon which stage, but let's assume your question leans more towards early stage, they're very comfortable dealing with volume and flow, maybe organically to the tune that they have been experiencing on their own. But suddenly with working with a large corporate partner, now the floodgates are going to open and the volume of customers, the tax on their tech stack, the behind the scenes operational implications, they may not be prepared for that. So I always urge the corporate to also do some stress testing upfront. We've learned in our experience, look, a couple of times we thought they were going to be able to handle it and ultimately they couldn't. And we had to kind of pull the brakes on the partnership until they were more ready. So I'd say it's a combination of kind of diligencing upfront, various scenarios, and can the startup and the corporate handle that? I think making sure that you're structuring a pilot maybe to begin with and not necessarily the full, okay, we're going to do this for real at scale. That's a really smart way to ease into it. And then having very clear partnership agreements where ownership rights of decision-making, governance, milestones, stage gates are very clearly delineated. We have another question. How successful are business ventures today versus 10 years ago, and how much do corporations allocate for CVCs? Gosh, I think this is a really broad question. I would say overall, the stats of successes are increasing just because we're doing it more. There's a lot more volume of deals from an investing as well as an venture building side. So you see examples of successful startups and unicorns, all over the place today, but maybe the behind the scenes story is they've been brewing and cooking for many, many years. And of course, we've seen this cycle once times through before 20, 30 years ago, right? So, but I would say today, most corporates find themselves in a post-innovation, post-disruption world. I find very few corporations questioning why innovation matters at all, or is the threat from new entrants such as startups and tech companies real? So that's kind of a foregone conclusion, which is great. Today, where I see the most energy for dialogue is around how corporates want to do it. And so there's a lot of discussion around, should we do something internally ourselves because we've got secret sauce, we've got subject matter expertise, we have proprietary knowledge or skill sets that is not readily available on the outside, or heck, we may just want to keep the secret sauce for ourselves, as oftentimes some of the reasons behind why corporates still want to do internal innovation. And externally, I hear a lot of, well, so how long do I have to wait before I see a tangible return from a incubator, accelerator, CVC, or just working with startups? And so it really depends, right? I think it depends on what forms of innovation work that you're doing. Hey, if you're doing the lofty horizon threes, expect there to be a lot of failures and a pretty long, lengthy runway. You have to be able to continuously withstand that and continue to put forth the effort, the behaviors, the funding necessary to get to those successful outcomes. But I think, just getting access to deal flow alone, I'm also finding is less and less important to corporates who all have done enough innovation efforts of their own to be dangerous. And so, just by virtue of, look, if you're Amex, if you're Vanguard, or if you're Comcast, right? Startups are more often than not still clamoring to try to work with you. And so what I found now, more of the focus is around exactly the previous question that Rob asked, which is, how do you structure the best arrangements? And is there a portfolio approach? So more and more companies are layering internal with external partnership efforts. Yep. And in terms of allocation for CVCs, it really depends. It depends on how much is your overall corporate operating budget and what portion of that you want to dedicate to strategic R&D and innovation, right? So if that's, the best companies, there was an article that I saw a few months ago, allocate up to 10% to strategic R&D and innovation. And if you're a large company that's very successful with a healthy operating budget, that's in the billions and billions of dollars. So, that's a pretty lofty commitment, but even if you're doing 1%, that's better than not doing anything. But if you are dedicating that, whether it's 100 million, a billion, or, just 10 million, I would say maybe a good approach is to be able to spread that out across a variety of methods and approaches to see which one works best for your organization before doubling down. So I seldomly see the first time CVC fund of corporates to be, 50 million plus, and generally they are smaller, or they prefer to partner with fund managers on the outside, or maybe hire fund managers to come into their CVC to lead those efforts. David also asked a question, how do you find corporates that are interested in external innovation, and how do you check alignment for strategic partnership? David, may I ask you to clarify your question when you say, how do you find corporates that are interested in external innovation? What do you mean by that? Which aspect of that? Maybe Walt.
David, I just unmuted you, so you should be able to talk now.
David's still on mute.
Oh.
Sorry about that, David.
No, that's all right.
Okay, there you go. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, I guess my question is, you're talking about corporations that are willing to go outside for new innovative ideas. And as a lowly startup, you know, how do you attract those larger corporations, or specifically for a product that you feel might be, you know, in alignment with what they're already doing? Do you reach out to them, or do they, I mean, do they make themselves available through advertisements or something of that nature?
Yeah, it's a good question. So if I understand it correctly, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, the question is more around, if you put on the shoes of the startup founders, how do you effectively access and pitch to the corporates that you may want to partner with? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know that there's one way per se, but here's a couple of ideas for you to think about. So it really ranges from like structured to completely free for all. On the structured side, there's a variety of forums, pitch forums, reverse demo days, industry events, conferences, demo days, whereby very deliberately corporates may host or sponsor a platform for interesting startups to apply and pitch their product ideas to the corporate. In my industry, as an example, Finovate happens twice a year, every year, and is a great way for financial services firms across all different sectors within that industry to get a look at the most promising startups globally that are working on a variety of interesting things that range from early stage to maybe product market fit has already been established. So that would be an example. This notion of a reverse demo day is starting to be more and more popular, whereby the corporates are getting together to then pitch to the sea of startups on the types of interesting problems they would like to have addressed within their corporation, or the types of capabilities and product needs that they may have. Again, incubators and accelerators could be a really good way to bridge the two. I think they play a very important translator and connector role, whereby oftentimes they are engaged with corporate partners who may be LPs or sponsors, that will dictate to them the type of strategic focus areas that are really interesting to them. And they are tasked with finding the most promising startups that play in those spaces. So these are some of the more structured ideas. And then unstructured, I got to tell you, it's, work your network, right? So if you find an in to a head of product, tech, innovation within a particular corporation today, I mean, even though I'm outside of that role and I sit more on the investing side, I probably still get 3 to 5 pitches a week coming from all over the world pertaining to fintech.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. That was good.
Yeah, you're most welcome. In the interest of time, Carrie, maybe we just have a couple more slides of content. Maybe let's try to step through those. And again, thanks so much for questions, guys. Continue to bring them up. All right, so I think we're getting to this already, but when you're thinking about corporate investments and corporate partnerships, why is it so difficult to do, and what are some things to be aware of? You may find yourself in the seat of the corporate tasked with doing these things, or maybe as the startup, as David just asked, thinking through how best to prepare yourself to engage with them, right? So first and foremost, startups, please know that corporates do not move at your pace. Even the best ones, the most forward-thinking, the most experienced with innovation, they just don't, right? So you may tend to think about minutes and days. They may be thinking in weeks and months. And so both sides should very much be aware and try to meet somewhere in the middle to craft expectations up front around what stage gating and timeline looks like. Generally speaking, most startups don't have the time, ability to endure a lengthy diligence process. So again, I oftentimes would suggest crafting in somewhat of a sandbox environment, a pilot, let's say over 3 months, 6 months, to see how this partnership works before making a decision if the corporate wants to do more and form a more serious longer-term relationship. Let's see. Yes. So also there's another thing about signaling. So whenever a corporate becomes involved in a startup, whether it's investing in them or kind of working on a pilot with them, whether it's intended or not, it just almost always happens. The CVC's involvement naturally validates the portfolio company, right? So how does the Spider-Man quote go? To much is given, much is expected, or those with great power have great responsibility. It's a little bit like that. So, corporate, for you, it might be a very small investment, or it might be one of many, many investments that you've made. But to the startup, please know that having your name brand recognition on their roster means a lot. And it increases their degree of confidence and ability to be able to additionally fundraise or accelerate talent attraction or product build. And so make sure that you exercise that involvement carefully. You don't want to overwhelm a startup, right? You don't want to kind of sweat all over them. Please know that you are not the only investor that they have in many instances. And even if you are, the reason why you love the startup is because the founding team members have cooked up something really great and have been able to move quickly. So you don't want to smother the very thing that you just invested in. So make sure you kind of fight the tendency to want to control it, to want to dictate, mandate, manage every detail of this. It is not a project. It is a living, breathing thing that unless you trust in the founders' abilities and you really believe in the product and problem and solution behind their product, you probably should not invest. And some of these other things we've touched on already, but just a really quick note. CVC cares about returns, portfolio company and other VCs will see them as customers and users too. And so just know that your weight and involvement, even if you're doing nothing other than writing a check, is also signaling to the other CVCs in the community. There is a little bit of a not great presumption in the marketplace that sometimes CVC money is dumb money, that they don't add as much value as traditional venture capital money where they are hiring staff who are former successful founders or deep domain experts, and their job as operating partners is to be able to help accelerate growth for the startups. I don't think that presumption is necessarily true. Certainly some CVCs are very much passive LPs and they're writing checks to be able to fund the development and let somebody else really drive that. But in other instances, as we discussed in the previous slide around various forms of partnerships, they can absolutely help to influence in a positive, healthy way by sharing domain expertise, by doing testing with the startup, by recommending them or introducing them to resources and experts and connections. And so there's a variety of ways that you can help and really lead to some great impact without, micromanaging and sweating every single decision. Great. And then lastly, sorry, there's another question. Nicholas asks, is there a template or deck that you use to frame the ROI for an innovation initiative? For example, what is your approach to get buy-in? The short answer is yes and no. So you definitely will find yourself pitching senior leaders to get a corporate innovation effort off the ground. And it's not very dissimilar to what a startup founder would have to go through, which is a repetitive series of pitches, right? I first pitched this idea five plus years ago to Vanguard, and a year and a half later got the call, got the tap on the shoulder that I was going to be leading it, and then started a series of no less than maybe a dozen or so formal pitches to the C-suite, the CEO, senior staff, and twice to the board to be able to do this once I crafted out the vision, the operating model, and how every component of what we were trying to do is going to work, right? And so, look, corporations are stewards of their underlying clients' resources, and so they have to be very careful about how they allocate capital. So it's not just innovation is the right thing to do, give me $10 million. It's, well, how are you going to go about this? What have you done in terms of diligence to weigh the trade-offs between various approaches? And generally, from my experience, it behooves you to ask for some with the understanding and agreement that you have the option to ask for more later if certain things prove out. Right? Asking for too much upfront could also overwhelm you as the leader of a corporate innovation effort, because you might not know what to do with all that resource. You might not be able to prioritize efficiently, or there's too many things coming at you at once. That for sure is going to be the case. And not asking for anything or too little, of course, may stunt your growth. So, if you ask for a healthy enough budget to maybe get a couple of proof of concept teams off the ground, if you're doing internal efforts, or a worthwhile enough number to get you into the accelerator, incubator, or CVC game, but having much clarity and advance alignment that, hey, if these things prove out in a year, 3 years, 5 years, what are the potential step ups in additional funding that you might be able to secure? So, I treated myself as any startup founder would, and built out my product, which is the operating model of the innovation studio, the same way that a founder would their tech product, and pitch to my board, e.g. my funding source, in the same way that startups would. So the journey kind of never stops. The more you know, the more learnings you can showcase, the more KPIs, the more pivots that you can point to, and open dialogue along the way, I have found has helped me earn the trust, the credibility, and the right to be able to ask for more. Okay, I think we're on the final slide. Yes, so I say all of those things not to scare you. Hopefully everybody on this call is still as enthusiastic about either working on the startup side or the corporate innovation side, because look, growing through innovation is it's a must, right? On the good side, you have access to a new stream of products, services, and businesses. It allows you to stay competitive. There are potentially higher margins and growth due to first movers advantage. Speed could be on your side. Productivity could be on your side. Of course, there's the possibility for great investment returns. And in today's day and age, it's not an understatement that access to disruptive technologies, new markets, and customer opportunities is everything. But it's hard, right? Otherwise, everyone would do it. Otherwise, everyone would do it well, because senior managers face strong incentives to focus usually on the shorter term, what's happening now or this year versus stuff that could be uncertain way into the future. It's also hard because on the people side, managers may not know how to achieve some of the breakthrough products and technologies, even though the buy-in and the intent is there. Again, we talked about large corporations are just fundamentally focused on different things than startups, and therefore their incentives may promote incremental change and discourage risk-taking and experimentation. So just recognize that and figure out what is the right path of aligned interest and how will you measure it in between. The ability to manage uncertainty is a skill set that I think is increasingly more and more important to business leaders of today and tomorrow. And so it's not only innovation leaders need to be able to do this well. I think all business leaders do. And then, of course, it's hard because very easily you could have misaligned metrics, idea selection, customer insights, and then that big C, culture. So in the class, we explore a lot of the tools and techniques to unpack some of the hard, different ways to combat them. So yeah, innovation is essential to growth, and the ecosystem is vast and complex. It's got a lot of moving parts, but it's super interesting, and to someone's previous question, very, very much opportunistic, lots of potential and untapped spaces still to go. So.
Great, thank you. We might have time for one question if there's someone who has been waiting for a chance. All right, don't see anything, so let me just double check here.
Oh. Very nice.
Okay,
thank you, Gina.
so Gina says she took the class last semester and highly recommend it. So let me move on to our tell you a little bit about the program. If you liked what you heard and you're like, wow, I really need to learn more about this, or this is in line with what I want to do in my company, or I'd like to get into this field, we have programs that specifically address these types of topics. Obviously, Lisha is one of our instructors. I teach innovation intelligence, which is also running over the summer and in the fall. We have both a master's degree, which can be done in as little as 1 year or 2 years if you want to do it part-time. And we have graduate certificates as well. There's 3 different tracks in the master's and 3 different types of graduate certificates. They're designed for working professionals, so everything's either online, everything can be taken online, and most classes can be taken in person as well, or you can do a combination of both of those. If you'd like more information, my email is up on the screen. You can also scan that QR code to take you to the website that'll give you more information. And as Lisha mentioned, her class is running again in the fall, so you can sign up for that and take that online. If you're not sure if you want to go for the master's degree or even the certificate, you can sign up for the certificate and take just 1 class. There's no obligation to finish their certificate if you decide it's not for you, but you can take 1 class, see if you like it, and then if you want to continue with 2 other classes, you'll get their certificate, or maybe you just love it so much and you want to go forward with the master's degree. So again, my information is up there. If you want more information, I'm happy to talk to anyone about it. Thank you again to Lisha. Thank you everyone for joining us. We really appreciate developing this community, and we may increase these webinars the next couple months given some of the limitations on in-person events. So I hope you'll keep joining us and we can all continue our learning and knowledge transfer together. So thanks a lot and have a great day.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.